Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Girl Woman with Lara Rathod. And we are now going to have part two of our conversation on being 30 something with Ujjvala Ballal Shetty. So, we talked a lot in part one about the importance of relationships, in particular, the relationship with yourself. And so, this seems like a natural jumping off point to kick off part two, because Ujjvala, as she said in her introduction, she trained as a lawyer, but she realized very early on that working as a lawyer was not for her. And she's made, in her words, intuitive, intentional choices. And from somebody who also did law, but has spent almost 20 years working as a lawyer and now has decided to change careers. I'm really excited to learn a little bit about her thought process and how she approached work and making the choices about what kind of work to do.
At the outset, I should say you make it sound a lot more, uh, it sounds better when you say it than what it was really like. Back, I need to kind of backtrack and share a
Sure.
little bit of a story. When I was 22, I'd spent 5 years doing law, which was how long the course is in India. I spent that entire 5 years part of a student organization called ISEC, which facilitates a global internship program. And, it was just the most wonderful experience. I met a lot of people, and I believe I got exposed to managing people and doing change and having impact that's very positive. And maybe that played a big part of me not wanting to pursue law. I loved law as a subject. I still do. And I still believe in the power of law, especially on the policy side of things, more so in a country like India, where we have a long way to go in terms of reform, legal reform. But so when I was, about to graduate, or I just graduated, I decided I should not write off law without meeting lawyers and talking to a few people who are in the legal space and taking their advice. So I decided to talk to a bunch of people. I contacted, six, seven, eight lawyers, and I met them. And to cut the long story short, I happened to meet who eventually became my boss and my mentor and today a close friend and many things. I met him, and I asked him a lot of questions about law and what I should do, and I left that conversation with a book recommendation, which was a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. And maybe we can put a link for that book later.
Sure.
And that book was, in many ways, a turning point in my life because it literally awakened me to the fact that life is not just what we do in the outside world, and that there's an inner journey that we need to explore and make. And there isn't a destination, but that journey is very important. And I think that was the beginning of a spark. I feel I didn't know much, but that's why I call it intuitive, because it just felt right. And a few months later, I ended up, I joined him in his startup, which was Inclusive Planet. And, I met the most wonderful people. But uh, that also started my spiritual journey, what I like to call my spiritual journey. I, I did a series of things. I questioned many fundamental beliefs. I did courses in in India we have a lot of ashrams, and I think I went to a beautiful ashram in Coimbatore, and I did this whole inner journey, and I meditated. I did a lot of meditation for a few years, and I'm a bit out of touch now. And if I have to look back, I think there are different courses in this journey, but I really believe that each of us, and I mentioned this earlier, have an important inner journey to make. And our minds and our I don't know what, I don't have the right word. I don't want to say heart, and I don't want to say mind, but we know intuitively what we want to do. We choose to ignore our intuition oftentimes because it's not what society has taught us. It's not what we're conditioned. It's sometimes not even the conventional choice. And it's hard to listen to intuition because you cannot always justify in logical terms why you are doing what you're doing. But I think it's important to follow that, right? To follow that inner voice. And we we drown out that inner voice by, listening to all the other noise, and I think the whole point of this inner journey, meditation, and there are a lot of different things you can do, is basically to make that voice louder,
Yeah.
you know. And I feel at every point in my life when I feel like I am going off track and I'm losing that path, there are, whatever you want to call it, like people being sent into my life to remind me about that. And the
Yeah.
most recent experience is a close friend of mine who's a mother of one of my daughter's friends, who is now a very close and dear friend. And I feel like she has become a person who reminds me that what happened, why aren't you back on that journey? And she spoke to me, she gave me a book, actually, that was The Surrender Experiment. And
By Michael Singer.
yes, by Michael Singer.
I've
and
heard of
uh,
it, but I haven't read it.
and I think that's a sign that I have to gift it to you, so don't buy it.
Okay.
But that book taught me, the same thing. It's his journey, and it's about his life and how he, in many ways, allowed life to happen to him. He didn't resist the things that he was meant to do, and I think we all have to do that, and that has been, I think we have to keep trying to make that voice louder and louder, and listen to it and follow it. And that's what I mean by those intuitive choices. And sometimes we just have to go with it, go with the flow of life.
So you started your career at the startup, where presumably you were doing a whole bunch of stuff, because with startups you're not.
Marketing, management, you know how startups are,
Yeah.
everyone's doing everything. Yeah.
Okay. And so
And
then what was your career progression after that to where you're
so
now?
so when the startup was, we I think we I worked there for about 3.5 years. And we decided as a team that, there were a lot of differences in terms of the long term vision, and so we decided that we'll move in a different path. I worked for a year in a law firm because I didn't want to be a lawyer that never practiced law, so I wanted to make. And I mean, in many ways I also feel that was because it just so happened that my father was building a hospital, and we actually ran into some legal trouble, which was, we never saw it coming. And it's very common in India, where, anyway, I'm not getting into that, but I actually happened to be at the right place at the right time to solve that legal problem. And
That's
it
synchronicity. That's just like it's
it's
meant to be, to teach you something.
I have friends who joke that I took that job just to help solve this problem, and that's when I quit. And it really was not like that. It didn't happen. It looks like it did, but it did not. It just happened that way. And and my father, who's a doctor. He, like I told, I grew up in Dubai, so he still lives in Dubai, but he had a lifelong dream of building a hospital. And so it's a huge project. It was 125 beds, and he was not even here, so he still isn't. And I said, let me come and help you build, complete the construction, and then, we'll get a team, and, I'll move away and then figure out what I want to do with my life. And I spent a year with that, and I just really enjoyed it. And I think I started learning so much about healthcare, and about hospitals. And we are in a location where we don't have many hospitals around us, so there was such a need for the people of this area. And I haven't it's like I never got off that boat. 7 years later, I'm still here. And it's been the most wonderful, challenging, but very I'm not getting the word, but very I mean, how do it's very
Rewarding,
satisfying experience.
fulfilling.
Fulfilling. Yes, fulfilling is the word I'm looking for. It's, and of course, COVID has um, been,
A challenge.
challenge. I mean, it's, and to say it in the most, it's been life altering, but I think it's also been an opportunity for growth, of unprecedented growth, for us and for me personally. So it's, that's where I am right now. Yeah,
I mean,
intuitively.
it's an incredible, I was going to say it's an incredible opportunity, but it's like almost like, you know, as you have invested in the hospital, you know, like the hospital has also allowed you to grow. Like you've grown within your role, you've grown within, I guess, learning all of the different skills, because obviously running a hospital is a huge, huge thing. What's the mission behind the hospital? Like, what's sort of, when your dad had the vision? Can you tell us a little bit about that? I want to keep it more on you, but like, I'm curious for our listeners.
Well, his vision, he, studied here. He did his medicine in India, and he worked here for a few years. And then he went to Dubai, and, he saw so much, and healthcare systems are much, much better there. And I think whenever you come to India, you realize that you can get anything of any quality, the best quality, as long as you can pay the price. So what he wanted to do is, can you give quality healthcare that's affordable, that the common man can afford? And that's what he wanted, without compromising, having the best equipment, the best doctors, because that's really what, accessible healthcare is.
I
So
mean,
that's what he.
to a society, it's just fundamental, right? It's a
Yes.
cornerstone, I believe, fundamental right of people to have access to that, and that, you know, doesn't happen all the time.
It doesn't, yeah. Especially in developing countries like India, where healthcare is often only available to the people who can afford it.
So, what would you say in the last 7 years that you have been in this role? Would you say that there are, can you tell us a little bit about one or maybe two things that you've learned about yourself and about, you know, about, I guess, work? Like you're doing very different kind of work to lots of different people. And I think there could be some real value in that can help somebody else in, you know, as they navigate their career.
So I think the first thing has been that, I started off by trying to emulate other hospitals. I would visit other hospitals, I would meet doctors, I would go to other places and try and say, how do I replicate this? And 2 or 3 years into the journey, I realized, why am I doing that? Why not do things in a way that we believe in, how things should be done. So to give you an example, I we changed the way we recruited staff, right? We changed our interview process. We said, let's, the technical skills are easy. Like, that's just a test, you do it and you figure it out. Because, 80% of people who work in a hospital do come from a, medical background. So they should have done a particular course or a degree. And, that's just mandatory, because you can't do the job otherwise. So that was easy, right? So
Okay.
now what else are we looking for in our people, in who would fit into our team, who share our values? And I think that this is something, probably, I can't say no one, but very few hospitals do. And that has made a big difference in our team. And that was one thing. The second thing is, healthcare is, sorry, did
Wait,
I?
before we move on to the second thing, so how did you, like, can you tell us about what is
So,
different about your recruitment process and what you came to create with that?
so a lot of our interviews. So, firstly, almost every staff, every potential candidate, I interview them. Of late, now that we've crossed staff strength of about 130, it is harder, but I still interview every single person who comes at a manager level, because I believe that that's important for me to also be on the same page, and and bring them up to speed as we recruit. And every single induction is conducted by me, so I know, even if I haven't interviewed, I know every staff, and I share my views, my thoughts, my journey with them. And I think that's something they should relate to, and it's important, right? But in our interview, what we do is we ask a lot of questions about why they made certain choices that they did. Why do they want to be in this profession? Because healthcare is so much about service. Of course you are earning money, and of course you have families to support, etc., but it's a lot has to be about truly caring for the patient. And I think that we ask questions like, can you tell us about incidents that that you where it shows what you cared for your patient? Or and that everything is in the details, right? So when you hear someone who remembers the names of a patient, or a specific detail, that they truly cared. And someone who's kind of vague and said, I and using very cliche terms, it's not coming from a place that is very genuine. So I think these are a few examples of and the other thing is, we're looking for someone who's not always looking to be told what to do. We want people
That's
who are very,
self-directed, somebody who's
yeah.
self-motivated, self-directed.
And I feel like that has helped us solve so many problems of accountability within the team. And so it's very linked to my second point. So my second point is healthcare in India, and maybe everywhere in the world, is very, very hierarchical, right? It's almost
Okay.
like the army or the military, or where you have to follow orders.
Okay.
And you have a doctor, you have a nurse, there's a specific hierarchy, and the doctor gives certain orders, you have to follow it by the bedside, because it's just how it works, right?
Mhm.
There is no way that you can't do it. But I believe that in this hierarchy, there is
Mhm.
a room to build a team, to also treat each other as equals in a different context, right? So maybe not in the space, like inside, by the bedside of a patient, or in an ICU, you cannot choose to follow this. But the minute you step out of that, because there are so many things we need to do as a team outside of patient care,
Mhm.
where we build the team, I think it's important for us to embrace each other as a team, which is something which if I have to be very honest, we've only been doing in the last 2 years, not, from the beginning. And that has been a big transformation for us, because now I am not communicating to my team what to do, but I'm communicating to them where we need to be. And then they are figuring out the rest, because they want the same thing. If we all want to be in a certain place, I'm sure that people know how to get there, right? So I
Oh
think it's that common vision.
my God. Like, you're literally, again, speaking my language. I believe so. uh, Leadership is like one of the things that I'm the most interested in. And what you've just described is the well, you've described a lot of things. So this is what I'm hearing from you. In your journey, you made the decision to trust in your own judgment, and have the creativity to create and divert from the paths, the entrenched paths, and the ways that other people were doing it. So a job that allows you to think creatively and forge a new path already is an expansive type of role. And it's so important, I think, for everybody to have an element of that in whatever job they do, right? The ability to think creatively, because as you think creatively, you're harnessing your mind in a different way. Then you're talking about departing from the usual recruitment processes. And what I believe, having worked in 7 different organizations, and I've, had the benefit of tremendous leadership, and I've also, endured not great management. And there's a difference, right? A leader is a visionary. A leader people follow because they believe in them and they
Right.
believe in the vision. Whereas a manager is just somebody that's in the hierarchy above you that tells you what to do. And so very, very, very different. And I think personally, we use the word leader way too much in society. We call people in charge and people who are managers leaders. And even by saying that they're not a good leader, like a bad leader, you're still using the word leader, and that's not right, in my opinion. So what you've done is you've been intentional about looking at the kinds of people that you want to bring onto your team, and not just looking at, oh, well, these are the roles that need to be filled. It's important for you to have a real sense of who somebody is. Because when you have a sense of who somebody is, then you can solve problems together. You can solve the unexpected problems, like COVID has been a
Yes.
masterclass in
Yeah.
leadership and management, shall we say, right? On country scale. And you
Yes.
see, because that blindsided the whole world.
Yeah.
And what we've seen is the ways that some leaders, like I would say Jacinda Ardern, even the way that she's communicated to her people by formal press conferences, but then also informal Facebook Lives, which I have watched some of them, and how she's responded to questions and she's like told them that her thought process, it's very different to other governments where the people generally either don't have the trust and they can't take responsibility. So I think like who you are really defines how you respond to problems, which will always come up. And so
True.
when you're talking about the vision, like now you kind of are able to steer the ship with showing them the goal and then trusting in their ability to cohesively work together, that must be so fulfilling inside to kind of like self-actualize, what you want, the environment and the kind of work family that you want to create.
Yeah. Yeah. For the first time in my so I about for the last year I started writing a gratitude journal first thing in the morning. I write
Oh,
things that I'm grateful for, and it is amazing how many times I have written about my team, and I surprise myself. But because it wasn't something I wrote 5 years ago, or I thought about 5 years ago. I wasn't writing anyway, but I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't thinking of my team as my team, right? And it's amazing now how often they come up, and that for me is a gift, and that I want to really treasure and make sure that, because that is, I think we cannot do anything alone. It's absolutely not possible. It's everything boils down to the people around you, the people who can make anything happen, and that's most important.
and then it becomes a symbiotic relationship, right, which
Yeah.
again ends up fulfilling both parties.
Yes.
So I'm kind of conscious of time, and I really want to talk to you about parenting, because another mentor that we both admire a lot is Dr. Shafali, and
Yes.
you're raising um, a girl and a boy. And I would love you to talk about, you also alluded to, at the beginning, how when you guys became parents, that also changes your relationship. But I'd like to focus more on how you have been able to parent together and how you've been intentional about, I guess, breaking cycles of, um, cultural kind of hierarchical parenting to the way that you guys
Yeah.
parent.
I'm going to explain one, incident, or one, particular thing, for so that it's easier for me to explain and not just kind of drone on. So, when my daughter was young, we felt we were at a bit of a roadblock, that, our, what we thought were the right ways, or how we were doing what our parents, how they parented us. We were kind of doing the same thing, and we felt it wasn't working. And as you might have noticed, I often turn to books whenever I'm at at a bit of at a spot. And that's what I did again. And everyone was like laughing, maybe I think at me, and saying, "What's wrong with you? I don't think parenting is anything you can learn from a book. There are a lot of things you can learn from a book." But anyway, I picked up this book called Raising a Spirited Child, which is a wonderful book again. And there was this one thing that I read in this book about introverts and extroverts. And we all know who introverts and extroverts are, but the what I read in the book is that introverts are people who lose their energy when they spend time with people, And extroverts are people who get energy from by spending time with people. And when you look at that definition, we are all introverts and extroverts at different points of the day or at different points in our lives. But it's important to recognize whether we're introverts and extroverts from this definition, right?
Hmm.
So, by definition, I am an extrovert and I absolutely love spending time with people. Like the conversation with you right now is actually giving me energy. So, I'm going to go
Me
home
too.
like bouncing off the walls. I'm going to be talking about this conversation to my kids, to my mom, to my husband, to everyone who's willing to listen. And that's just who I am. But my husband, on the other hand, is an introvert who is, you will never call him an introvert. If you know
Yes,
him,
I know.
you and you would never describe him as an introvert. But the truth is that he is great in a social setting. He is amazing. He's very good with people. But at, at a core level, he's an introvert, which means
At
that
an
all the
energy
interaction
level. Yeah.
with people is draining him of energy.
Mhm.
And my daughter is actually also an introvert because spending time outside in school with friends, with family is actually, she's great, she's very social, but it's actually draining her of energy. So we realize that even when we're outside, in a public setting, and we've now learned to follow certain cues, because I think there's always certain cues before a meltdown, that we kind of just take her away from the people or the crowd or whatever that situation is, and we just give her time to just reset.
Replenish. Yeah.
Yes. You know, and the beautiful thing is, I think that this was not just helping us to understand my daughter, help us understand our daughter, but it also helped us understand each other. Because before I read this, the minute Dheeraj walked into the house after a long day at work, I would jump on, him literally and say, "How's your day? What was it like? Who did you meet? What did you say?" Ask him 100 questions. And he would actually he was at energy level zero, right? And he did not even have the energy to tell me, what, I can't talk right now. And I would look at him like, what's wrong with him? We haven't seen each other the entire day. He doesn't even want to talk to me. And I would make it about me when actually it had nothing to do with me. It was, he just needed some time. It would probably just be 30 minutes of him going, having a bath, just kind of unwinding. And then he'd be fresh enough to come speak to me. And that's just one example of how understanding your children can also help you understand yourself, the people around you. And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to kind of be very mindful as parents and be understand what the needs of our children are. And yeah, that's what it's been like.
I think that's going to help so many people because what you're describing is attuning with your child, like paying close attention. The fact that now, well, actually, before that step, you're open to learning. So I think that, people think of parenting as, oh, well, you just get a child and then you parent. I think of parenting as a huge undertaking and a huge privilege and a huge responsibility if you're going to do it intentionally, right? And intentionally means really thinking about why you're doing what you're doing and not just sticking with convention. And so for you, you sought information and you sought knowledge and you sought ideas, which can come from books. They can also come from, talks and courses and whatever, right? Because now in this multimedia world, we have access to
Exactly.
information so much. If we want any information, Google is our friend. And by going down rabbit holes, clicking one thing and another thing, we will generally get to sort of find somebody who resonates with us.
Yes.
So you learnt the information, you then started to attune with your child. And the other thing that you and I talked about in the prequel, which I'd love you to tell the audience, is we talked about, I can't remember the context of it, but you said how you realized in parenting that your reactions were not even necessarily about what was happening in front of you. Your reactions were about your sort of own expectations and beliefs and other things. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, this has been a COVID learning in a sense because my daughter's school's online now, and she has online lessons, and I've been a part. I've been lucky actually to be a part of it because we don't get to see this part of their lives otherwise. And So the first 2 weeks of school, I found my daughter very keen to answer questions and be the first person to answer. So I kind of discussed with Dheeraj and said, she's quite competitive and, she loves to be first, etc. And he said, okay, well, that's who she is. And, cut to like 4 weeks later, and she is not interested in answering a single question. Even if she knows the answer, she will offer the answer if asked, not kind of try to be the first one to answer, raising a hand. And I was really puzzled because I didn't understand this, because my conclusion was now being questioned, right? So I tried to look, observe her a little more, and I realized that what she wanted initially was to get the attention of her teacher. And in a few weeks she realized she had the full attention of her teacher, even if she didn't have all the answers. And that was what I realized, that we come to many conclusions without really examining what and I think maybe it's got to do with my own conditioning, because I was very competitive, and as a child in school, and I just assumed that that's what my daughter was like. But I didn't actually try to understand where she was coming from in the context of her behavior. And I think that that's very important with children, that it could be a meltdown, it could be questions that they have. There's a context. We need to place things into a context and then try to understand it, and not go to something that we instantly come to these conclusions, which we often do. And of course this extends not only to parenting, but even with in daily life, and with friends and everything.
And that's really beautiful, actually, because this kind of parenting, whether you call it intentional parenting or conscious parenting, but really parenting the child that you have in front of you, and not the child of your pre-framed expectations and beliefs, and sort of is revolutionary, I think. And the other thing about parenting in this way is that in the course of doing it, it challenges you to
Yeah.
let go of your expectations of, oh, hypothetically, like, well, I was a smart child. So I got straight A's, or I knew the answers to XYZ. So I just expect my child to do that. And then you put all of this expectation on your
Yeah.
child, and you start seeing your child as a reflection of you. And so when the child, who maybe doesn't like this subject, maybe doesn't love English the way that you loved English, or doesn't love reading, or whatever it is, right? Whatever, like, you kind of come up with in your brain, the little rule, then it's so easy for the parent to then feel like, oh my God, like the child is letting me down. And it becomes more about you and how
About
you,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And sorry.
no, no, no,
And
no, you go.
oftentimes this is a daily conscious choice that we need to make as parents. It's not, I think it does not come easily, and it does not come naturally. So it's a very conscious choice, and it's very easy to slip into old ways, right? It's because it's
When you're
because we're
tired,
older.
when you're distracted, yeah.
Yes, and more than that, I think it's age, right? You think you're older, you know it. They're children, they don't know it. We know what's right and wrong, and it's that's just ingrained in us, right? That obviously we know more than them, right?
Mm.
And it's so hard to be conscious and to be aware. It's a very difficult thing to do. Like you said, you're running late for work, and you have a deadline to meet, or you have a project running, or you have to do the laundry, or whatever it might be. It's very hard to kind of stop and make that conscious choice at that point in time. But that's what makes parenting difficult, but also more rewarding when we choose to do it that way.
And the other thing about parenting that I hear quite frequently from a lot of people is that parenting can actually be something that, let me choose my words carefully, that can bring challenge to your relationship with your partner. Because I think, and what I've heard and experienced from talking to a lot of people who are parents, is that when we become parents, we bring so much unconsciousness to it, but stuff that we didn't even know we thought or believed or felt. So there's all the stuff that we didn't even know, but then you're parenting, in a lot of cases, if you're parenting with a person, somebody else who's bringing all of their stuff to it. So then you have to like, well, how do we decide? So how is it that you and Dheeraj have been like, have you found that it's been easy to kind of talk about these new ideas and these new ways of doing things and breaking the patterns from, the way that you guys were parented, and you're making intentional choices to sort of parent differently? How did that sort of journey come about?
You know, it's a tough one, to be honest, because I think this is where we are a work in progress, because our kids are young, we're still learning.
Everybody is, Ujjvala, like that's the whole point. Like it's like we're never done, right? So we're always learning and growing and building on our
Yeah.
experience.
I think that we still, while we differ on a lot of things. We don't agree on everything, but we do share, certain values which we hold, very close to our heart. But I think one of the biggest catalysts has been that we both believe that some of the old ways, they just don't work, right? Like being extremely authoritarian just doesn't work. It hasn't worked, so we had to change. So I don't I mean, I won't give a lot of credit to the both of us to say that we were, very conscious and very aware. I think that we just, like, it didn't work. We tried to, order our kids around, and it didn't give us the desired results. So we had to change our approach. So, I really think that's what happened, because I won't say that it was, like a revelation of sorts. We said, let's look for another way.
But okay, you're downplaying how revolutionary this is. Okay, but the reason that it is because look, we all in our lives generally outside of parenting, when we think about changing ourselves, first of all, change is really hard.
Yeah.
It just is. Any change, like we know things that we should do, I hate using that word, but I use it a lot. So I'm trying to change that. But we know the things that might be better or healthier or more supportive to do in whatever
Right.
context, and we don't, right? Because it's hard.
Yeah.
Then when we
It's
actually embrace change and we go, okay, I'm really going to work on this, the actual process of change is hard.
yeah.
Then when you come to something like parenting or any relationship, right? Because parenting is another type of relationship. What you said that I really want to draw out for the audience is that we tried to order our children about and it didn't work. We saw that what we were doing was not working. And so then we looked for another way to be.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
didn't just carry on doing
Yeah.
something that wasn't working. You were aware enough of the situation. And that's the beauty about children, because, they are unfiltered, right? If something's not working, they generally, I mean, not every child, some child are, very conditioned. I was like a really good girl. But, a lot of children, like they have the freedom to just have the tantrum because their brains are young and not, formed as well. So you made the decision to change your approach because you had the vision for what you wanted, and this wasn't it.
Yeah, yeah. I think, see, there are so many factors that play into it. Like, I think one of the things was we wanted to enjoy this journey, right, of being parents. We didn't want to be at some point when you see yourselves angry and, irritable. And I think we recognized that, and we said, we don't want to be those. We want to enjoy this, right? The other factor was meeting other people, meeting other parents like us. We don't live in a silo. We actually have, now a close group of friends, other parents who share our values, who think like us, and that has been a big um it's been an easy way for the both of us to get to the same page. A discussion between two people is very hard when you're coming from opposite sides. But when you have more people,
Yes.
who are part of that conversation, it feels safer to have that conversation, and you all come to a conclusion, right? Because when
Yes.
it's one against the other, it feels like you versus me. But like you said the other time, when we're talking about a team, when you're talking about it in a group, it's also like a conversation. So I feel like that community has also helped us a lot. The school that we made a very conscious choice. So we how we picked the school really was we visited a bunch of preschools, and Dheeraj and I was sitting and talking to the principal of the school, and we were in the tree house, so these kids couldn't see us, right? And there was all the kids were inside,
A
and there
school
was
with a
one.
treehouse is
Yeah,
amazing.
such a wonderful school. I wish I could go there. And you know, and both my kids love school. Like they look forward to going to school. So we were sitting in the tree house, and there was all the kids were inside, and there was this one boy who was playing by himself outside in in the play area. And every few minutes there was a lady who would just come and check on him to see if he's okay and go back inside, right? And I didn't know what was happening. So I asked the lady, like, why is he outside? So they said, he they just went on a vacation and he's back, and he's not yet ready to join class and his friends back again. He's not there yet. And Dheeraj and I actually were both shocked. We were like, a school that lets a child be who they are, this is it, right?
It's like
And
heaven.
yeah, and we have, and that was a conscious choice, right? Putting her there and choosing not to go to other schools, which were more popular, and etc. etc. Because admissions in India are a very big deal. It's very hard to get into a good school. It's very competitive. So a lot of parents choose the preschool that lets you go to the right school, and there's that whole thing. But we made this conscious choice to choose this school instead, and that school has been a support system for us. So even now, the teachers, they tell me sometimes that don't change her or don't change him, let him be who he is, or let it. And it's so beautiful because they are also serve as reminders to kind of be better versions of ourselves. So I can't point to one thing that led us to want to do things this way, right? I think it's so many things that have come together. And we also have the privilege of being exposed to people like Dr. Shefali, and even Jay Shetty. He talks a lot about being, your parenting is not necessarily just about, it's also about who we are, right, as individuals,
Yes.
and what we
And
choose to
and
do.
and that was really important what you said, the school reinforcing to you, let the child be who they are.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, that's a really beautiful way to sort of bring parenting to a close. I'm conscious of time. I know that I have one last question to ask you, but
yeah.
I know that you also wanted to say, a little bit about being a seeker and being somebody who embraces and allows yourself to explore difficult emotions. One of the difficult emotions in life is loss and grief. And I know that you learnt an important lesson recently, that you weren't aware of before. So if you can share that with us, and then I will ask you the final question.
Yeah. So a few months ago, I lost a friend. We were acquaintances really, but I didn't. But it was very sad. It was very sudden. But his wife chose to go embrace social media and talk openly about grief and talk openly about the very difficult work that goes into dealing with the death of a person. And I follow her very closely, and it's been such a eye-opening experience for me, because maybe I haven't seen death very closely, but I think we know we don't like to think about death. We don't like to talk about death, especially in our culture. I can't speak for everyone. And and I think it's a very uncomfortable topic, which has made me realize we need to speak about, because for many different reasons. For a, we need to we have to communicate what we want to be done, a very practical thing, like what do we want to do with our body, with our assets, or with what we anything, right? Someone should know, because no one really, we don't speak about it, we need to document it. There are also the practical aspects of what we leave behind, like in my case, like it could be my husband, my children, my family. There is so, what would you like, right? How do you tell the people who are left behind? And there's also how we handle or how we treat people who are going through this grieving period, right? We think about grief as a period in someone's life. They just lost someone, they're grieving, and then we expect them to be fine a year later or 2 years later or whatever, right?
Or
And
not even like a
what,
year. Sometimes it's like, oh, it's been 5 months, you're
yeah,
still
why
crying,
snap out?
yeah.
And the language that we use, and we're so, maybe it's not necessarily that we intend to be malicious or
No.
rude, but it's I have learned that there's so many things that we say. Like an example would be, often people who have lost someone hear from other people that you are so strong, or I wouldn't have your strength. And no one does. No one has the strength to deal with death. Absolutely nobody. Even, someone who's lost a very old, grandparent, it's still very hard. Nothing can make it better. Right. And I think that we are not conscious as a society. We're not conscious of the language we use, of the things we say, of the questions we ask, of our expectations of a person who's grieving. And she's, I mean, she's like a daily reminder to me, of also to be grateful for what we have, right? To not forget that things can change from one minute to the next, and we should talk about it.
What's her account, so that people who might be interested to follow? If you don't know it offhand, we'll put it in the notes.
Yes, I don't know offhand. She has a public account where she
Yes.
shares, talks
Okay.
about.
So when you send me it, we'll put it in the notes for people.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Clearly, I could carry on talking to you for ages. This is becoming a pattern now. I should know. But my last question for you, Ujjvala, is what does finding your voice mean to you, and why did you want to be part of this series?
So I had to think a lot about this, my answer to this question. And, you know, f- okay, I'm going to just answer it simply, right? So finding my voice to me has really been about freedom, right? It's like freeing myself of all, the shackles of expectation, of what I thought I should be, my own expectations, society's expectations. And it's just been just being very comfortable with myself, and just being free to do what I want, say what I want, and just be who I am. And why is it important? And why was it important for me to be a part of this series? Is because I think all change in history, all change has happened because of people speaking out. Nations have been freed because of people speaking out. And I think, maybe we are not in those crossroads of history right now, or maybe we are. We will never know unless, we are here 100 years from now. And I don't know what could spark something that I say or I do may spark some change. And that's, what I could only hope for. And so I think that's why it's important for everyone to speak out, because that's how change happens. And that's how, we all move forward.
I love that. That is the most beautiful way to end. That's exactly what my hope is for doing this series, and every time I make a video, I hope that somebody will somewhere will hear something that lands with them at the exact right time they need to hear it.
I have
So
to appreciate you for all the wonderful work that you're doing. And I imagine, I mean, I really cannot imagine the amount of work that it takes, because, just preparing for this one call to be very clear and structured is very hard. And you do it every day, and you have been doing it consistently for so long. And I really have to appreciate you for it and thank you for it, because I am sure you are changing lives with the work that
oh,
you're doing.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of it. And thank you so much for a beautiful, beautiful conversation, which was like a dance. And so thank you for dancing with me.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you, Lara.